and welcome to Science Fiction, Race, and Racism, a video blog and channel about the most famous and influential works in science fiction and how they deal with issues of race, ethnicity, racism, prejudice, and intolerance. Both the best and the worst, the most groundbreaking and insightful, and the most callous and clueless. Science fiction has a long history of both being opposed to racism, prejudice, and intolerance, but also of conscious or unconscious racism. Sci-fi fans, authors, and works are often said to be above, beyond, incapable of, and far past any prejudice. This is often the appeal of sci-fi, especially the most utopian works. Sometimes a sci-fi story or theme or setting can be another way to comment upon, critique, or completely tear apart prejudice and hatred. For others, sci-fi is pure escapism, a way to get away from such issues. Sometimes this backfires. The most escapist sci-fi work is often the most racist. Sometimes the same three approaches or beliefs coexist within a work of sci-fi, within an author, or within a sci-fi fan. My name is Carroll. I'm Associate Professor of History at Northern Virginia Community College. I teach American, American Indian, and Latin American history. I've written mostly about wars, veterans, human rights, and genocide. I've also written some science fiction, mostly alternate history, including a sci-fi alternate history book, The Man in Black, the first of a series. This is the second of 5 videos about the most popular and influential sci-fi series of all time, Star Trek. In over 50 years, there have been 8 television series, 13 films, plus novels, comics, magazines, games, theme parks, exhibits, fan conventions, fan-made films, fan fiction, and fan sites. A big part of its popularity is its optimism, idealism, even utopian vision. Its point of view, infinite diversity and infinite combinations, is a central part of why it caught on and remains influential. The first series began in the middle of the civil rights and anti-war movements. It had a multiracial cast in a time in which that was still very unusual. It had as Spock a mixed-race character, presented as mixed species, and mixed-race relationships at a time in which that was actually still illegal in much of America and the world. But for all of its powerful symbolism and arguments for a future where racism and prejudice were problems of the distant past, the series and films often showed themselves to still be very powerfully influenced by the racist assumptions of the time in which it was made. Start with something very obvious. Most of the original cast and crew were whites, European ancestry. Out of 8 regular characters, 6 of them were white, 5 of them white males. These proportions are roughly similar for the rest of the crew and the rest of Starfleet depicted. In the future, are European ancestry people 3/4 of Europe's Earth population? This has never been true at any time in human history, not even when 3 different slave trades cut the African population in half for 400 years. Surely Star Trek's writers were not arguing whites, who make up only 1 out of 6 of all humans, make up 3/4 of all humans in space in the future. This would imply either mass deaths for Africans, Asians, and others in wars, or that in the future, humans outside of North America and Europe have low technology, or either never desired or not allowed to travel in space. Obviously, Gene Roddenberry and his writers were constrained by what American network TV would allow at the time. Compare the original Star Trek cast to other series of the time, almost all of them all white, and the original Star Trek looks downright radical. A cast that was mostly Asian, African, Latino, and Arab came much closer in later series and films, though it took another 2 series to have as a main character a captain who wasn't white. The time in which the original series began was only 2 years after Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech and the passage of the Civil Rights Act. Roddenberry was a strong supporter, and his anti-racism extended both to his previous writing and his personal relationships. When it came time to bring in diversity to television, Roddenberry chose an African woman with a distinctly African name, Nichelle Nichols, portraying Nyota Uhuru. Uhura's name came from the Robert Rourke book title, a novel about the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. Nichols had guest starred on a previous Roddenberry series, The Lieutenant. Nichols and Roddenberry also had a romantic relationship for several years. She was a formal model and Playboy bunny, chosen partly for her looks. She is constantly exoticized throughout the series, there to look sexy for the cameras and bring in a young male audience. This was true not just for Uhura, but virtually all females on the original series. The ironic exception was Nurse Chapel, played by Roddenberry's real-life wife, Majel Barrett. Uhura's role was communications officer, but she was given little to do. She does not take part in negotiations, treaties, or first contact. Half her lines are hailing frequencies open, making her almost a telephone operator, as was common in the 1960s before phone service became automated. Nichols became very dissatisfied with her role and planned to quit. By her own account, that changed when she met Martin Luther King. King told Nichols, "You are our image of where we're going. You're 300 years from now. And that means that's where we are, and it takes place now. Keep doing what you're doing. You are our inspiration." Star Trek was one of the only shows that King and his wife allowed their small children to watch. Nichols thanked him, but told him she was leaving the show. King stopped smiling. He said, "Don't you understand? For the first time, we're seen as we should be seen. You don't have a black role. You have an equal role." And that stopped her from quitting. Of course, the best-known episode she was in is Apollo's Children, famous for the supposed first interracial kiss. In fact, there have been such kisses on TV for almost 20 years, starting with Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz on I Love Lucy. It wasn't even the first such kiss on Star Trek. That was Ricardo Montalban, a Mexican playing an Indian from India, kissing a white woman. Apollo's Children was just the first black-white interracial kiss. It had to be done under the pretense that Kirk and Uhura were under the control of aliens making them kiss. Contrary to myth, there were very few complaints to the network about it. This was not the last black interracial relation shown on the original Star Trek. In the episode Mirror Mirror, Uhura and 3 other characters are transported to an alternate timeline. In that other universe, it's suggested that Uhura and Spock have a relationship. Sulu is also shown chasing after Uhura, who rebuffs him, perhaps the first Asian-black relation shown on TV. In the rebooted Star Trek films, Uhura was played by Zoe Saldana. Again, sex appeal was central to the character. Her first scene has her stripping to her underwear. A central part of the storyline is her romantic relations with Spock. This time she is scripted as rejecting Kirk's advances. It of course has become a running joke and constantly commented on by not just the Star Trek audience, but all across popular culture. James Kirk seems to romance a constant line of women, both aliens and humans of all backgrounds. In the course of the original series, Kirk chased after, by my count, an android, a shapeshifter, an Orion, a Thrall, a Scalosian, and at least 7 human women. 8 if you count Mirror Universe Kirk. But this series was still being made from 1967 to 1969. All 7 of those human women were white. Almost all the alien women were also played by white actresses and look European. Usually only their clothing shows them as supposedly being alien. The only time Kirk was with a non-white woman was when he was under alien control, as in Uhura's case, or in the Mirror Universe, where his mistress was Asian. Kirk frequently romancing alien women was a coded way for Roddenberry to argue for approval of interracial relationships, the same as he had in his private life with Nichelle Nichols. In spite of restrictions of the time, the original series had a remarkable range of black characters. Besides black extras and bit players as crewmen, engineers, security, and medical, it had the character of Richard Daystrom, a computer genius played by William Marshall, a classically trained actor best known for the Blackula films. Obviously, Roddenberry was arguing for a future where black scientists were not unusual, where genius and achievements were no longer held back by prejudice. Daystrom was also unusual for the time another way. His being a villain had nothing to do with his race. The original Star Trek also had the minor character of Commodore Stone presiding over the court-martial of James Kirk. Originally written as elderly, white, and retired, the character was then rewritten as, quote, Negro accustomed to command, unquote. Again, Roddenberry wanted to show a future where African commanding officers were everyday, much as they had already begun to be in the U.S. military since at least the 1940s. The second major recurring African character in Star Trek is Geordi LaForge in the Next Generation. The character was named after a quadriplegic fan of the original series and was also the series' first disabled character. He's played by actor LeVar Burton, best known for his role in the groundbreaking series Roots. Geordie's background was specified at the start as being from Somalia, part of the African Confederation with military parents. In one version, he was originally supposed to have a Jamaican accent. Giving him a Caribbean origin explains better why he has a French last name and English first name. Geordie was one of the earliest black nerds, shown positively and with a wide range of interest. He's intellectual, specified in early casting calls to have nothing, quote, street about him. Going against type, Geordie is shy with women. In some alternate history episodes, he married Leah Brahms, possibly German ancestry, but born in an Arab colony. A major change with the first Star Trek movie continued in Next Generation. Klingons as a people were originally an exaggerated alien depiction of Northern Asians, and obvious stand-ins for communists in the Cold War. Writer Gene Kuhn even described them as, quote, Oriental. Starting with Worf in Next Generation, Klingons were played primarily by black actors, or others with dark makeup. The newest series shows them as darker still. The changing features are explained in canon as from a series of genetic experiments. Still, Klingons are not culturally similar to Africans. There is a code of honor similar to Bushido, including ritual suicide. In other ways, they are closer to Vikings. Klingon religion has a messiah and a holy grail, but its afterlife is closer to Viking paganism. The Klingon subculture among Star Trek fans certainly has a higher percentage, but not exclusively, black following. Another major character in Next Generation was Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg. Her people were El Aryan, genocide survivors in a diaspora caused by Borg invasion and forced assimilation. They are physically similar to humans, except much longer lives. Except for the headdress, there is nothing to distinguish them from African humans. The notorious episode Code of Honor is the one jarring depiction of Africans on Next Generation. An alien race, the Ligonians, are straight out of a 1940s colonial film. They are caricatures of Africans, with turbans, flowing robes, and baggy satin pants. They are shown as violent, over-emotional, and fighting with spears and clubs. The original script had the Ligonians as a reptilian species. Director Russ Mayberry changed that, casting only black actors. He was fired by Gene Roddenberry. Will Wheaton remembers Mayberry as racist toward the guest actors. Jonathan Frakes urged the episode never be broadcast again. Patrick Stewart called the episode embarrassing. It's widely panned as one of the worst Star Trek episodes ever. The next series, Deep Space Nine, was the first to have a captain as a central character who was not white. Benjamin Sisko was played by Avery Brooks, his character born in New Orleans. He also portrayed a single father. And in a sharp change, writers and actors felt it important to show him in an explicit same-race relationship. This was in line with long-standing arguments in the black community where black males who choose white female partners are often criticized as abandoning their people. In the two-part episodes Past Tense, Sisko and two others go back in time during the Bell Riots, showing a near-future Earth where homeless people, many of them black, are forced into a walled ghetto. The inspiration for these episodes came from the Attica prison riots, where mostly black prisoners rose up to protest being abused, only for almost 30 of them to be mass murdered by guards and state troopers. In the episode Far Beyond the Stars, Sisko has visions of being a black sci-fi writer in the 1950s, unable to get a story published showing a black space captain in the future. In the course of the episode, Sisko is beaten by police, gets fired, sees magazines with his story destroyed, and is finally locked up in a mental hospital. Both storylines were something rare for Star Trek, depicting racism on Earth, in past tense's case, in the future, rather than resorting to symbolism or allegory. Both episodes were also among the best written and best received in all of Star Trek. The character of Tuvok in Voyager brings up an intriguing question: how to explain black Vulcans. Tuvok was not the first. There was also a black Vulcan priest in Star Trek III: The Voyage Home. Several other minor characters were also black Vulcans, plus Tuvok's wife and son. Star Trek canon says these were introduced simply to show there was a variation of skin tones and appearances among Vulcans. But clearly they are a minority, and are among Romulans as well. There was no effort to show them as a distinct culture or cultures among either Vulcans or Romulans. In most ways, Vulcans and Romulans are made to resemble Asians. But there are no European, Arab, or Latino Vulcans nor Romulans. Nor are there even mixed ancestry Vulcans, implying that logical Vulcans forbid or even outlaw intermarriage. This fits with Star Trek episodes, where Spock described projection by Vulcans when he was a boy. None of these implications of a racist, segregated Vulcan society stop black fans from cosplaying as Vulcans. On the next series, Enterprise, the character of Travis Mayweather is perhaps the most undeveloped black character in all of Star Trek, and on the most poorly received of all Star Trek series. He has very few lines, and the backstory for him has him raised on starships, part of a family tradition. The next series, Star Trek Discovery, was a great improvement. Malka Burnham is the central focus of the entire series, the first non-captain to be so. Her storyline is she was adopted by Vulcans, coming from a mixed cultural background. Discovery's creators did so knowing black children are often the most difficult to be adopted, the longest held in foster care, and in the highest numbers. While almost everyone, especially longtime fans, praised Shaniqua Martin Green's performance, she was attacked online by white supremacist trolls as part of non-existent, so-called white genocide. Star Trek has had the most success in portraying black or African characters of any ethnicity or culture. There is a higher proportion of African American characters than Africans, and there was that one disastrous Next Generation episode, but their depictions of black characters, issues, themes, and storylines shows exactly why the series won such a loyal following for so long. This is the end of the third video. Look forward to your comments and questions. Please repost freely, like, share, and comment. Next video we will discuss Star Trek and Asians. This has been Science Fiction, Race, and Racism video blog and channel.